All right, it is 6 o'clock, and a quorum being present, I will call to order this, the, January 2nd, 2024 meeting of the Charter Review Committee. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is to review the meeting minutes from December 19th. Are there any changes that folks need? Any inclusions, any deletions, any amendments whatsoever? Excellent. Hearing and seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve. Mr. Levin motions to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Mr. Costello seconds. I will call the roll. I'll note that we have a quorum of full voting members. So Mr. Bulletin, if you had a vote, how would you vote? Yes. Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yeah.
Mr. Lawler?
Abstain.
And abstention. Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mr. Pizer?
Yes.
Ms. Votran? Martha, you're muted if you're talking. One more minute. All right, I'm gonna skip over Martha. Rob, how do you vote, Mr. Zuccarelli?
Yes.
I vote yes, and I'll come back. Ms. Votran, how do you vote? I will take that as an abstention by matter of no voice. Excellent. Well, that is approved in a vote of 7 in favor and 2 abstentions. Our next order of business is to get into our discussion items. I'm gonna turn things over to Mr. Pizer, who has a proposal for us here this evening. So Larry, the floor is yours.
Okay, I think all of us are in general agreement that the public needs the ability to understand town government. And the only issues that we've been dealing with is how best to accomplish that. You've all heard me say multiple times that we need a handbook. And what I thought we would do, because I do plan to continue my suggestion that the charter itself contain direction items specifically that the town needs and not repetitive items that are available somewhere else. So the idea that I have is that there should be a handbook, and to get this started, I am proposing subsection W is because it ends at V at present in the section on the town manager. And I am prepared to move that the town manager shall be responsible for the creation and maintenance of a handbook for town government describing processes the town follows to accomplish its ends. And to be clear, when I say the town manager, he does have some hundreds of people working for him, and I don't expect that the town manager does this specifically, but that he supervised and is responsible for it.
So you making that as a
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Pizer makes the motion and Mr. Hutchinson seconds. Is there discussion on the matter? Alan. I'll go Alan, Steve, then you, Betty.
Sure.
I for one like the proposal that we put together some sort of document or handbook. My only question is, we presently have been referring to the town meeting handbook, which is already in existence. The committee of precinct chairs has formed a committee recently to work on this, update it. Maybe we can coordinate two groups together. The only hesitation I have with it is I don't think it belongs in the town manager's office. I'd say the town clerk, but the town manager, just you alluded to it. It started to take quite a bit of responsibility across the whole form of government, and I think it's too centralized. It comes out of that office telling town meeting how it should act.
So, if I may, and this is not specifically town meeting, it's not,
What's anything to do with the charter, isn't it?
it has to do with the public coming into an understanding of how they confront government. One of the things that's in the present charter, has to do with causing elections, and that's not a town meeting matter. Definitely, the public should understand how they can do that sort of thing, but it doesn't belong in the charter because it's state law that causes that. So the reason I thought that the town manager was the appropriate spot, not that the town clerk doesn't have her tentacles throughout town government, is that I would expect this to cover virtually every office in town, and the town manager oversees every office in town.
I understand that logic, okay.
I'm gonna go Steve, Betty. I have, Rob, Joe, Len.
Pretty much everybody. We've talked about handbooks and creating handbooks, and I agree with you. There's things that don't belong in the charter that should be identified somewhere. But the phrase, a handbook for town government describing processes the town follows to accomplish its ends, just seems way too nebulous for me, given that how the town accomplishes its ends is done through a myriad of groups. It is the select board, the planning board, town meeting, now through the COPC and their additional responsibilities, the school committee, other elected bodies, other appointed bodies. So that's stuff the town manager is not going to be able to describe and identify the processes that the planning board is going to follow versus the COPC is going to follow versus the school committee is going to follow. If you're talking about a general description of how town government works, I don't think that that's a charter issue. I agree, it's probably a nice thing to have, and we should certainly do it, and the select board should probably be, and the town should be thinking overall about how we describe our system of government in an appropriate pamphlet or something, so that the registered voters and the residents can say, okay, I don't understand this form of government, I'd like to know how it works. And I know that the League of Women Voters has had a forum that talks about how our form of government works, and that was a great forum and a great introduction for a lot of people. But I just think this language is very, very nebulous. It doesn't really identify what it is we're trying to ask the town manager to do. And anytime we put something in here that isn't clear enough, it's either going to morph into something that we don't want, or it's gonna be so vague that we're gonna go, well, we'll never end up getting done. So I'd like to suggest that we have a discussion as to exactly what it is we're asking in terms of a description, being a little bit clearer, because if this is vague to me, it's gonna be vague to the town manager. And once we're done, there isn't going to be a body that says, oh no, we're gonna try and clarify what it is we meant.
If I may, you identified exactly what I did on purpose. I understand what you're saying. The danger of being specific is leaving things out. And Um, I was believing that the town manager, the reason I chose the town manager is that it's an established central position.
Mhm.
There are lots of other groups that could easily have a finger in it, and the town managers we hire are smart enough to engage all of those people. So when you're concerned about the planning board, the town manager has any sense, and he does, he's gonna get to the planning board and say, give me a language, and then they can deal with it from there. If, I have no specific pride of authorship, but what I was doing was to do exactly what you were fearing that I was doing. I was saying to the town manager, we want as many things as possible in this handbook. So that a person who has a question can deal with it. If we want to put more in, that's fine, but it wasn't an accident that I put it this way.
Betty, you're up next.
Okay, well, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, Larry, although I respect the whole handbook thing, it certainly, I don't believe should be in the town manager's office. Secondly, a handbook, I guess what I want to know is a handbook exactly for what? Because Google is a great handbook and we don't have to spend any money on that. Or a phone call to a town, one of the town administrators or something like that, if there's some kind of a burning question. If we are going to be placing law, actual law in the charter, which everything will be done according to law, if there is a specific law that we are talking about, it should be referenced in whatever charter revision part of what we're speaking of. It should be right there. So you don't need to look at the charter and say, well, this is going to be this according to the handbook, or according to, you can just put MGL 3.5.4 or whatever it is. I think that, first of all, the town manager doesn't have time to maintain a handbook. Sorry. But I think it's kind of like, if we're going to put it in the charter, it has to be done. And I just don't think, I don't think we need that type of detail that we have to print a book about it where we couldn't reference it in exactly what we're doing here, because it's too confusing. If I'm reading it, obviously the people in this room know how town government works. And unfortunately, everybody else probably doesn't know as much as we do on how town government works. But the problem being is, if I am looking at something and I see something that references a Mass General law, I want to know what that law is right there. I don't want to go to a handbook. I want to see what is exactly the law is. I'm not saying you have to put out in all the rating of what the actual law is, but making a reference to what that law is so someone can go and look it up.
Thanks, Betty. Martha, I see you and Charlie trying to figure out your side of things. Can you hear me? Still no. All right, we're gonna keep going down the list. I've added you to that, Tim, but we're gonna go to Rob first.
There's a couple things I think that are worth noting and maybe worth talking about.
Oh, I can hear you now, Charlie. And
We're having a problem because we're on a different computer.
All right, we can hear you now and I can see you now, Martha.
Okay, I don't know how to use this computer. Well, it's a laptop. So Charlie's going to stay here and help me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Sorry. So there's a couple things that are worth talking about here. I like the idea. However, I think the problem is with the word handbook, first of all. If if we look at comparisons, I kind of feel like we're talking about something that would compare the Constitution of the United States with our charter here. Now, and what I mean by that is there are 7 articles to the Constitution, and then there's the Federalist Papers that go on forever, that explain those 7 articles of the Constitution, not to mention the amendments to the Constitution. I kind of feel like that's what we're talking about, would be not so much a handbook, because a handbook connotes directions and something like a manual. But I feel like we're talking about some kind of a white paper that explains to the general public what town government is and how town government functions. I also think that in this, we're also talking about roles and responsibilities of the officers in town government. We've talked about town meeting members, and specifically using town meeting members as an example. We've talked about town meeting members understanding what their roles and responsibilities are, and having something that town meeting members, for example, can refer to so that they understand exactly what they're getting into. When people volunteer for something, they don't necessarily understand what they're volunteering for until they're knee deep in it, and then they realize the work that they've signed up for. So I think we're talking about, I feel like we're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about something that explains town government in a Federalist paper style, certainly not 87 chapters. But I also think we're talking about another document that describes the roles and responsibilities of town officers. I don't think those are bad things to have. I do think they would take some time to create. Having the town manager as the central hub to collect all that information certainly adds to the town manager's workload, but you do have to have someone who at least is a point person for this. So I think that needs to be, I think, like the town manager piece as an editor or collector of information, I think that needs to be a little bit more clearly defined. And I also think we need to differentiate between roles and responsibilities and a description of town government. I feel like we're talking about 2 different documents here.
Thanks, Rob. I got Len, then Joe, then Tim.
There's been an interesting conversation by Derek talking about something that's a goal for 2024, which is called institutional knowledge. And I think that there's a lot of information that is not written down anywhere. And I think the handbook is a place to do that. It's not telling you how to run the government. I've heard conversations about people are nervous about the town manager having responsibilities. And case in point is the person they hired to provide administrative support for the COPC reporting in the town manager's office. Just to be, in my perception of it and listening to the people talk about it, it's like there's something nefarious is gonna go on. Cause this guy is gonna do something. That, in my opinion, that we're getting away from that, but that job was brought forward because there's nobody in town hall to get the information that COPC wants. This town is like way understaffed for the size of the operation, in my opinion. But back to this handbook, it's basically, it's telling people how to do their job. And it's not just the COPC.
I'm on a committee called the the Distinguished Visitors Committee.
The what?
The Distinguished Visitors Committee. That committee is the committee that runs the visiting of, we have a sister city relationship with a town, a city in whatever it's called, a town in Japan. They're coming here in August. We're gonna plan. This is a major planning event. This is an operational committee. So we need to preserve that knowledge about how to run that committee. Because we just lost our chairperson who did it for a while, and everything he knows about it, it's not written down anywhere. It's gone. And so I think this handbook is not about the laws of the government, it's an operational handbook. It's telling people, and it's not just limited to that. Whoever does it, whoever owns it, I mean, we'd have to identify somebody to take on that job. You know, it's like committees, when you look on the website, committees don't have mission statements, they don't have charters, whatever you wanna call it for each committee. What is the purpose of the committee? What do they do?
Right.
And as I said to Dave early, there's a lot of committees that, in my opinion, just my opinion, are feel-good committees. There's a lot of committees that are operational. The planning board is very unique, the zoning board is very unique, but there's a lot of these other committees, like the ones that I'm on. I'm also on the cable advisory committee. We don't meet very often, we just did, but we won't meet for now for probably another year, because we don't need to. But that has some very specific operational responsibilities to the town. So I don't think it's a matter of whether it's in the town managers or the clerk's office. It's like Rob said, there's two separate things that are going on. Is there a document that could be put on the website that talks about the general, the way this town is run, that you could refer to somebody who's new to the town, doesn't understand representative town meeting versus that? As Betty said, you can go figure that out on Google. Google's really good about telling you that. But it'd be nice to have that. But I think this whole kind of, maybe handbook is not the right thing, I don't know what the right term is, but this town needs to do that, because with the loss of a few key people, this town potentially could fall on its face and have to go through a really painful process of relearning stuff. And any organization has that. The fire department has that. The police department has it. All their policies and procedures are all very clearly documented, anything like that. NASA is a great example. If you've ever been involved with NASA, everything is, I know those are engineers, they tend to be weird like me, but they're documented to the T, and I think that that's the kind of stuff. So I think, as Rob said, there are two different things we're here. We're not, and putting it in the charter, I'm not sure is a place to put that, but I think that's a goal of the town, and it's on the list of things that Derek and the select board is wanting to do. The last thing, and then I'm done, is a potential person that could manage this, because it's kind of in the communications world, is there's something being put in the budget to have a person be responsibility with communications for this town. Social media, all the different communication channels there are. And that, to me, is a communications. But I think that the select board needs to have an agenda and figure out how it's gonna happen to this institutional knowledge thing. So I'm done.
All right, Joe.
Just to kind of follow up on, Glenn's comment about, engineering geeks. So when Len was coding for an operating system, he was coding against a machine spec, which is to say the skeletal pieces that had to come into place, but in order to make the operating system work the way the machine was supposed to work, its intent. So what was the intent of this machine when we started to build it? And so that's kind of an engineering spec kind of thing. And if you want to make an analogy to the Constitution and the Federalist Papers, you could do that. The spec itself was skeletal. It's because you're gonna sell the machine to an education institution, you're gonna sell it to NASA, you're gonna sell it to Sikorsky, because they're gonna drop bombs on it. And so, there were many uses, many committees, if you will, a planning committee, so you're dealing with levels of density and audience and intent. And so those are kind of three different, well, there are at least three different levels to this problem. One is the skeleton that Larry's proposing that we hone the charter to. So just the bare bones. And then the next level is, well, what are the pieces that will actually make this thing work? And so you need to describe the rules, the processes, and the roles that are actually necessary to get a machine working the way that you want it to work. So that can be a hand. And in our world, and where Len and I worked, there was a machine spec, and there were Ken Olson's handbooks. And the handbooks were kind of that second level of usage information. And then for audiences, you would have a user guide. So, for people like me and Alan who try to figure out how the town works, we would have a user guide to tell us where to go and what to do. So there are really three things, and the first two, though, are, I think, essential because those rules, roles, and processes need descriptions of the intent surrounding them and the context in which they're going to operate, to Len's point. So if Larry wants to if Larry wants this to be skeletal, then there needs to be a handbook to accompany that intent and the context.
Thanks, Joe. Tim?
Whoa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, first question, Mr. Chairman, is where are we? First question. And then a follow-up on that question is what's on Rob's screen right now? Are we trying to figure out whether or not Larry's in the right direction? And if he is, are we going to take this thing offline and kind of work on developing what Larry's trying to say here? But help me, because I think we're going into the stratosphere here. So just, can you bring me back and
Yes, I can.
allow me to understand where we are, please?
I can do that. I think, so we're, from a practical standpoint, we're still in discussion on Larry's motion. But in terms of what you're seeing on the screen, the proposal is that a handbook be implemented, that it fall under the described duties of the town manager under chapter 3, section 5. In terms of where we are in accomplishing that, I will defer to the motion maker as to whether or not he feels that we are moving towards a place where we table this until we get some language, or if you want to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that I myself thought about this for several days before I wrote the small amount that I did. I have no question that the end, as Joe was describing it, is going to, in order to create a handbook, it's going to require a whole lot of different sections and then meet within the sections themselves. What a charter does is it lays out a responsibility without, I don't think, without saying exactly how that responsibility is to be done. I think when we, one of the things we heard from Derek when he came to see us was that he doesn't like the sections on finance and DPW because it says you must do this, and this, and that's his job. That we paid the big bucks to.
It's more operational.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is similar to what I hope we end up with in that section. I'm saying this is a responsibility of the town manager. You know, if at some point he doesn't do it well, a future charter committee can go out and slap it, but yeah, I'm willing to go forward with this.
Good. I'm gonna go to Martha because she's had her hand up for a little bit, and then I'll come to Len and Steve. Go ahead, Martha.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had problems getting on. We've had a house full for over a week of 6 kids, etc., and it probably is related to that.
No worries.
So I'm wondering, when I got this information from Larry, if you're talking about the handbook, the town meeting handbook that I have a copy of, and I looked through it today, and there's a lot of valuable information in there that needs to be updated. It's from 2012. So is that, I'm not sure that that is what Larry is referring to, but I was thinking that it was, until we're talking right now. And so my thoughts were that town meeting and town meeting handbook for town meeting members is legislative. Yes, and not executive, whereas the manager, the town manager, Derek, at this point, is an executive person. So I would think that if we're talking about updating and a handbook for town meeting members, then we would want to have the legislative branch of government be responsible for that. And aren't I right that the Committee of Precinct Chairs has been talking about, and maybe even started, there's already a committee, maybe a subcommittee of the Committee for Precinct Chairs to look into the town meeting handbook?
Yes, that is correct. There is a COPC created subcommittee that is exploring a town meeting handbook. If I may, I think what Larry is talking about is a broader approach in this handbook that would encompass all levels of our town government. I would assume it would certainly include information about town meeting, but it would not be the town meeting handbook per se. It would be something that a town meeting member could reference to understand, you know, who opens the warrant, when does the warrant close, like those sorts of things. But it wouldn't be the handbook that tells us what rules have been adopted by town meeting, which is essentially what the handbook is now. Does that answer your question, Martha?
Well, not really, because I'm still thinking that we're talking about a legislative responsibility, and yet I don't understand why
we're not
be responsible for it.
We're not. So I'll let Larry respond. I thought I covered it well, but
I thought so.
Jump
I wouldn't have an objection to making the town meeting handbook part of this. I wouldn't have an objection to keeping it separate. It really doesn't matter. But the handbook that I'm talking about, someone wakes up in the morning and says, I want to put a matter before the public. How do I go about doing this? And they ought to be able to find the answer to that in a handbook. That's just one example. This is not so much for, as we were talking earlier, the people who already know how town government works. But you know, the issue of how the budget is built, which ends up in town meeting, but isn't necessarily part of town meeting. So that someone wants to put something on a ballot that they can't. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they could go to a place and say, these are the things that can go on a ballot? That sort of information, as well as planning, you know, how the planning department works, how the various department works. But I'm aiming it not really at town meeting members. This is aimed at the public of Plymouth.
I've got Len and Steve, and I see that Well, Martha, do you have any follow-up?
So, one, and that is, so that was my other thought about it, is that it's a communication publication, and that I do see as executive branch and town manager. So if that's what it's going to be, is a communication publication, I agree it would be with the town manager.
All right, thanks, Martha. Len, then Steve, I have Tim and Betty. And I think that some folks in here may also be chomping at the bit to get back on the docket here. I will remind you folks that we have been on this for 30 minutes at this point.
That's fine.
So please keep your comments brief from this point forward and try not to repeat yourself.
Martha, I don't think it's got anything, people are attaching this to the town manager for the wrong reason. This is, there's, like, as I said, I think there's two different things. Rob said that. There's some kind of document. I'm gonna stop using the word handbook. There's some kind of document that's there for the general public to understand if they're not familiar with the way a town like Plymouth runs and different things and how to do things. It's a kind of a how-to document. The other side of it is, so somebody signs up to be a town meeting member, and as David has said, they accept the role, and then they find out how much work they have to do, and they go, oh, hockey puck, what did I just do? It's like my committee, the DVC, we're running an event. How do we run that? When the ones of us do it this year, if we don't come back next year, how do those people do it? And if you don't have something that's written down, then you keep reinventing the wheel and you end up making the same mistakes all over again. And so I don't think it has anything, the town manager is not gonna dictate what's going in the document. There's nothing that says that that's what they're gonna do. He's just the archivist. This document structure should have some kind of format so that it's consistent from one to the other. And so I think that's what it is. But I think we should put this off until we talk about section 3. Okay, we should finish up section 2 because we need to do that. And when we get to section 3 and we deal with some of the stuff that Derek and the select board told us last week, a couple weeks ago, when we were there, we can address this. And my opinion, and then I'm done. I'm not sure we have to say that we need to create these documents within the charter, whether it's the Constitution or the Federalist Papers. I think that's more of a goal of the town and running committees and stuff. So that's just my 2 cents.
Steve?
Two very quick points. One, I think we've literally heard now from within our group, 3 different sets of types of documents. We've heard about the overall structure of the government, how our government functions. That's one type of information we're providing. Then we've heard policies and procedures of our various groups and bodies. That's yet a separate document. It's not the same thing. And now third, we have processes, how those each individually, how the whole system, how each of those policies and procedures are then implemented into a process to create. So yet another set of documents. If we're talking about the idea, the simple, straightforward idea of saying, if I'm a resident, I want to know how to do something. The idea of creating a manual, a handbook or something is a nice idea, but it's an antiquated thought. What we do need to do is we need to have a source of information, which right now is supposed to be our town website. You literally should be able to get on the town website and type in the words, how do I do this? And that should take you to something within our town website. How do I put something on the article? How do I get a budget item put forward? And that's a very valid point. And that's something we should have. And that's something that we had talked about at other points, which is the issue of communications. And I think the town manager and the select board have talked about the need to change our communications, to create a communications directorship, to create a communications office, to have someone actually responsible for going to the various bodies and making sure that is on our website. So rather than create a handbook, which is an undefined term that we could literally create 3 different types of handbooks, and anybody could decide, whoever's the town manager could decide, okay, I want the handbook to be this. Well, that may not be what we wanted the handbook to be, versus the idea of having information available to people. And that's a laudable goal, and one I agree with wholeheartedly. But I think what we need to be talking about is access to information rather than creating a static document somewhere. And that's, I think, more important, because if we're literally trying to rely on getting every town department and every committee and every body to keep submitting something, it's not going to happen that way. Whereas we do want to have communications, and I think that's the point that I'd like to focus on, which is, you're right. Where do we get that information? How do we make sure that the town is responsible for providing that information? But I think the idea of a handbook is a little too narrow. I think that should be broader, and I think that should be an entire topic of discussion, which is town communications.
Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent job, Steve. I'm right behind you on that. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you for bringing us into the 21st century. I'd like to call a question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. Our custom is to move to a vote when the question is called. So I know folks have been antsy to talk more about this, but I do feel that we will go into a quagmire to continue much further. So I appreciate you calling the question. I'll call the roll, Mr. Bolton, if you had a vote.
Based on this language, it would be no.
Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco, your vote?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Costello?
Is the vote on the motion or calling the question?
It's on the motion. Yep.
Okay, at this time, I'm gonna vote no.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
No.
Mr. Levin?
No.
Mr. Pfizer?
Yes.
Ms. Votrain? Martha?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Zuccarello?
Stain.
Abstain?
Yep.
And I vote yes. It is a 4-4 vote. In that case, the motion does not carry. So we'll continue down. You know, Larry, if this is something that you want to bring up later, I think we can workshop some language and see if there's something that we can put into that.
If I could, the only reason that I brought this up at this point is that each time I suggested deleting, virtually almost each time I suggested deleting something, people said, yeah, but people need to know that. So we will probably return and figure out once we go farther into the process.
Yep, let's move on from this conversation. Since we voted it, since it's not passed, we don't need to worry about discussing further. Let's move on now to section 3, the 2-3-1, the subcommittee article that was discussed, that was distributed in our last session. It was a handout. It was the language that Joe and Steve and Alan came up with for the subcommittees. Rob, do you happen to have that handy?
Let's see. Joe, when did you send it?
It was Michelle that sent it.
Yeah, and it would have been 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
right, Steve?
I will tell you, I think I can tell you, because it'll be in my notes.
Pulling up my email as well, see if I can grab it.
It was on November 20th, I believe.
Give me a minute to pull it up. I don't have it in my file. I don't have it in my digital file.
I have December 19th.
Yeah,
It was December, my apologies.
I could be wrong, but
Well, there's
it feels more recent than that.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now, hang on.
if you discussed it at the last meeting, the last meeting was the one when we had the joint meeting.
Oh, well, I'm just telling you, there's a cover letter, it says December 20th, that's all. I mean, November 20th.
Okay.
That's what I'm,
Yeah.
that's what I'm basing it on. Let me see if where it shows up in my notes.
2.5% pretty much every year. My secondary question on this.
Is this it?
That instead of applying.
I believe that's it.
Yeah,
Yes. Can you scroll
Joe-
down just a little? Rob?
Joe, is this it?
Yep, that's it.
It's,
Yes.
oh, I'm looking at something different. My apologies.
So this would be, the one piece that we left out from the COP proposal. We asked, Joe, Alan and Steve to workshop some language on it, and this is what they came up with. So 2-D-1 would now read, the committee of precinct chair shall appoint subcommittees to review articles in advance of each annual and special town meeting in order to discuss those articles and make suggestions for correction of technical deficiencies. The committee of precinct chairs shall appoint such subcommittees as are appropriate for each specific town meeting. Such subcommittees shall be chaired by a member of the committee of precinct chairs, but may be comprised of members from the committee of precinct chairs and or representative town meeting members. The chair of the committee of precinct chairs shall be vested with the authority to delegate article review to the various subcommittees.
Oh, there.
So this was the consensus language, that
Dave,
was,
Dave, can I interrupt you for a second?
yep,
This is what you're looking at. This is what I have. What you're looking at is a PDF. Joe, if you have this document in a Word, if you have this language in a Word document, can you send it to me so that I can make changes as we're discussing it?
Yikes. I don't have a computer. Ooh, I might have.
so
Let me see what I got.
Okay,
I'll open it up to, questions from the committee, regarding this language that, our working group came up with. Are there any such questions? Larry?
I just wanted to clarify, in my mind, what we were talking about was whether or not there should be sort of a duplicate responsibility of the FinCom. And instead, we are changing it to suggestions for correction of technical deficiencies. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I'll let you guys answer.
I can answer it. I guess, Joe, you can send the summary of our discussion.
I thought I did.
Okay, so I had also prepared a summary of our discussion, so.
Yeah, I said what you wrote.
Sorry, again, I wasn't here last week, so I didn't, last meeting for that part, so I didn't see what was there, so I don't know what everyone did.
I am hoping I'm right, but I think that's what I did.
Okay.
Dave has the computer.
I'm not, maybe it came from charter.
I'm gonna ask a stupid question. What section is this replacing? I've lost track.
It's-
This is a new
it's
section.
new.
Oh, it's a new section. Sorry.
Regardless, I can certainly recap what's in my mind. So, yes, we went back and we really thought about it. The first thing that we decided was we really want to keep with the mindset of assigning responsibilities and not providing all of that level of detail. Responsibilities, what you should do, not how you should do it. That was the philosophy. So that's why we went with the more bare bones approach. Then Alan made a very, very good point, which was, okay, we have advisory and finance. They make recommendations. Do we really want to have yet another body doing exactly the same thing? Meeting, going forward, making their own recommendations. And the fact is, then you would have town meeting making recommendations to town meeting, which seemed to be sort of a repetitive process, because the idea was, well, no town meeting member should supersede another town meeting member's opinion on something. So they have the same level of ability to get information. because they're getting the same stuff from advisory and finance. Then we also looked at the time frame in which this would have to be done. And when you do this time frame and you were to say, okay, the warrant comes out, the articles finally come out, the decisions come out, and then there are hearings on it, well, they'd be holding hearings at the same time as advisory and finance. That seemed to be more of a conflict. The idea instead was to say, however, we do see a value in certain things, and we talked about some of the recent articles that had come up and said, gee, you know what? These were good ideas presented in a very flawed form. One was, again, the recent blight bylaw. And where there was a great deal of concern, not necessarily about what it did in general, but how this particular bylaw was written. Things that were missing from it, like an appeals process that wasn't there, or the fact that it wasn't clear as to what it was really focusing on. Whereas if the COPC had been able to say at that point, listen, we're not telling you yes or no how this is going to work, whether this will or won't pass, but here's the technical stuff that we think you should be considering. We think we thought that was a really good role for the COPC, rather than telling somebody, because then the concern was ultimately, now you have a committee of the COPC telling people, this is what you should do, with the suggestion being, well, the town meeting is telling me if I do this, this is going to pass. And that's not what the COPC should be doing, because the COPC can't make that promise. But where they could do is provide some of that technical assistance that advisory and finance is not necessarily providing. So based upon that, that's how we came to the language that we did, where we said, they'll create committees. The committees will be created based upon what's coming up in front of town meeting. Sometimes certain things, finance will probably be a committee created constantly. But at the same time, you don't need to have a committee that's necessarily going to be dealing with zoning bylaws if you don't have zoning bylaws coming. But if you have a zoning bylaw showing up, you go, okay, let's create a subcommittee to review this. Because then you have the people at that point, you go, okay, who's got an interest in this? Who's focused on this? Who understands it? That was why we did this, to give the COPC the flexibility to create the appropriate subcommittees and to narrow the focus as to what they were doing, so they didn't go down a rabbit hole.
I have the hard copy of the note. I can.
Go ahead, Joe.
So we started with a draft based on language that Steve provided, including strikeouts of the 2D1. We first considered the list of mandatory subcommittees, and our feeling was that we should require COPC to create subcommittees as needed for each town meeting, but not mandate specific committees for the charter, in the charter. The committee had expressed its intent to make charter changes, which assign responsibility to certain bodies, but left how those responsibilities were to be carried out to the assigned body. As an example, we looked at the language for the committee approved, committee approved for 2Y1. And we next considered what COPC subcommittees should do. The draft language we seem to be creating, we had seemed to be creating subcommittees that were duplicative of advisory and finance. And it was felt that the subcommittees should not be making substantive recommendations regarding articles, as that is the role of advisory and finance. Town meetings should continue to look at advisory and finance for guidance, not other town meeting members. However, we did agree that this would be valuable, that it would be valuable to have subcommittees review some articles and offer guidance as to technical issues, which would include poorly drafted / vague wording, conflicts with other articles or bylaws, and missing procedures. Some examples of legislation which may have benefited from such a review included the NIPS ban, which is on the table again, solar bylaw amendment, and the new blight law. And from these considerations, we recommend the attached draft for approval by the full committee. That's what we said exactly.
I think that summarizes it perfectly. I think, to answer your question, Larry, yes, it's moved away from duplicating the work of the
Just-
FinCom and moving more towards helping article sponsors get their articles passed.
Just wanted to make sure I understand. That's what they're told to do, but they're not, it doesn't restrict them from doing something else. In other words, if the committee of precinct chairs said, we hate Article 15, this doesn't preclude their making that statement, am I correct?
The committee precinct chairs
Well, they can do that now.
on their own, like outside of these subcommittees.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think this restricts anything of the COPC. In fact, I think it just further empowers them.
okay,
Yeah.
yep.
Glenn?
Yeah, I don't think it basically, they can do that now without this, right? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's right.
But what's a little confusing to me is what's to keep them from asking everybody come in and do what the FinCom does? Is this open enough that they decide that they don't like what the FinCom has done or they don't trust it? You know, and they all of a sudden, and now you've got people going in and from the CPC, you know, as we talked maybe last meeting before, having to go and make presentations to all these different, you know, working groups or these committees, because, you know, the town, it's a lot of that's gonna involve town employees, and now all of a sudden you're asking them to come and do this. And that are they gonna do it during the day, they're gonna do it at night. So I think it's good, but I'm concerned that. And you can't say, well, you can't do FinCom, you can't do this, you can't do that, but you can do this and do that. Once you start down that rabbit hole, it'll, you know, you've lost control of it. So that would be my only concern is if we're trying to eliminate duplication, how do we do that?
Yeah, I don't think this allows them to do anything outside of, making, suggestions for improvements on a technical level.
That was kind of the way we drafted, was that specific, Alan was very, very clear about that, and I thought that was a very good point that he had made, which is to say, we don't want to create new subcommittees going down these rabbit holes. What we want is to say, okay, again, solar bylaw is coming back, right, it will be in the spring. And it made a bunch of technical changes to kind of address the comments that were made, which if they had had those comments earlier, wouldn't have had to do it twice. And that's great for everybody because it's more efficient. We're not only considering something once and we're getting the best product possible. And it's fortunate in this particular instance that the people who are putting it forward were able and adamant enough to do this. But if you're talking about the application, they try once, they get beaten down because they missed the process, et cetera, and it was just something simple that they could have corrected, but they may not try again. So we thought that giving that assistance, creating committees that would give that assistance it's ideal because it gives the legislative branch the opportunity to make the legislation right. Maybe not good, bad, that's an alternate determination, but to make it right so that what they're voting on is the right version, so that they can say, I'm voting for this or against this based upon the substance rather than on poor language or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically having another set of eyes look at it from a different perspective. The solar one, there's a lot of opinion about what they were really trying to do versus what people thought, what they thought they were trying to do, what people really thought they were doing. And maybe if somebody had looked at that, they may have said, look, it's clear this is what you're doing and.
Well, I think you'll see it this time, for
You'll
that
see it,
very
let me
reason.
tell you, you're not gonna get it. I mean, it's the same thing Derek has said about the blight and some people have said about the NIP and all these, so. That's what the COPC and the town meeting members are there for. They're the, you know, it's a citizen's petition, but they're there with hopefully the expertise and the knowledge and understanding.
And especially with the idea of creating a subcommittee, rather than saying have the COPC do it, create a subcommittee of people who have a specific interest in that subject or an expertise even in that
Right.
subject that will be interested in working on it, rather than just leaving it to the general body, some of whom may and some of whom may not, or some of whom may go, I can't help you here, this is outside my field.
Yeah, it allows for a more robust discussion that can happen in the length of a COBC meeting. I'm gonna go, Joe and Tim.
What Len just brought up though was, a related point, which is that, there is some confusion from time to time, about, the expertise that town employees have to bring to the FinCom, which is considerable and often frequent. And then, another effort for us at COPC. And, you know, that sometimes feels like overlap and perhaps there could be in our deliberation, some sort of a process that we might be able to create, to relieve pressure on town employees. I mean, I think that's an issue. I don't know whether you guys think it's an issue,
I do.
but, you know, just
Yeah,
when Len said that, it just clicked for me.
Yeah.
So.
Tim, I have you next.
I'm right there. I just wanted, I wanted to illustrate a point. And maybe Rob can back me on this. This is the amount of homework that we had last year alone in FinCom members. There are 14 dedicated FinCom people that 15, thank you, Rob. 15 that put their heart and soul into putting together.
It's not dedicated.
We are, I'm telling you, we're very, very dedicated. And Bob can attest to that, trust me. I think we're getting into, in my opinion, is committeeism. A lot of committees, subcommittees of subcommittees. When there's an issue, get a committee. And I think that right now we have a very strong FinCom that goes into a lot of work. A lot of work is done and a lot of detail, a lot of discussion. And to just pile on with more committees to replicate what we do in FinCom, which is a lot of work. And a lot of dedication, by the way, and Rob can attest to this. I think we're going down a rabbit hole, Mr. Chairman, of just a committee to form a subcommittee. And then when we're done with the subcommittee, maybe go to another committee that COPC is really needing more responsibility of creating another subcommittee. And you're getting my point.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, I really wish that we would just move on. So is there a way that we can just address this issue that's in front of us with some sort of vote and just move on?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll have Rob has raised his hand. I'll let him speak, and then Joe, if you wouldn't mind making the motion, since you took the lead in the group, and if you could second, if we would like to move on. But first I'll let Rob have his comments, and then we'll go to that process.
Thank you. I've actually lost what it is that we're talking about. And I'm pretty good at following conversations, especially conversations that go round and round. I do teach middle school. So, and I think it's unfortunate that the Advisory and Finance Committee has kind of been held up here as an example of a committee that may or may not have some redundancy to it, that may or may not have understanding of the general population to it. I think that's really unfortunate. Tim showed you the documents that we worked with last year, and I can promise you that this year it's that much, if not more. I really think that this language, as it is a redundancy in and of itself. The COPC already has the ability to appoint subcommittee. I think that the COPC needs to define who and what they are as a committee before language such as this finds its way into the charter. If this is going to be made into a motion for approval, I have to say that I cannot support this, and I won't.
Thanks, Rob. I do want to address that I think this group actually works to eliminate redundancy from the good work that the FinCom does. They weren't saying that the FinCom itself was redundant. I think the sentiment was that this section 2-C-1, as was originally written by me, was duplicative of the work that you folks do on the FinCom. I think it's safe to say that everyone in this room appreciates and honors the work that the FinCom does. So I hope there was no offense. I'll say that I think no offense was intended, so I hope no offense is taken given that explanation. So Joe?
I would make a motion to accept this proposal as discussed by Steve and Alan and submitted in mid-December.
Thank you, Joe, and
I would second that motion, Joe's motion, thank you.
so we're voting on whether or not to adopt section 2-C-1 as displayed on screen here and as I read into the record as we began this conversation. The motion was made by Mr. Hutchinson and was seconded by Mr. Costello. Is there further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll proceed to a vote. And I have to get my vote document up here. Mr. Bulletin, if you had a vote.
Yes.
Mr. Hamlin is not present. Ms. Cavaco. Ms. Cavaco appears to have
Left the building.
left the meeting. So I will recall the roll, noting now that Mr. Bulletin is acting as a full member in the absence of Ms. Cavaco. So Mr. Bulletin, can you confirm your vote?
Vote is still yes.
Excellent. Mr. Hamlin is not present. Ms. Cavaco is now not present. Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
No.
Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mr. Pizer?
Yes.
Ms. Votrain?
yes,
Mr. Zuccarelli?
No.
And I vote yes. The total is 7 in favor and 2 against, with 1 of our full and 1 of our alternate members not present.
David, I am here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now, Betty.
That's okay. It wouldn't let me unmute, so.
I'm not seeing I'm not seeing you on my screen, so that's why I thought you dropped off. I will
That's okay.
have.
That's
One
fine.
vote.
Just go ahead. Steve can do my vote.
I'll take your vote, Betty, because I want to make sure that this one's on the up and up.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So the vote tally doesn't change. It's just that Mr. Bulletin has gone from alternate to full back to alternate. So the vote total is still 7 in favor.
One motion.
Do you have a yo-yo?
7 in favor and 2 against. Okay,
Back in the building.
all right. So we are gonna move on now. We had a robust discussion about 2-4-1 in our last meeting. We talked about eliminating components of it. Rob, would you be able to pull that up on screen? Oop, I don't know what I did here.
Oh, where is, where is this?
In the actual charter document.
No, that's not what I was gonna ask. Is this gonna be what we just voted on? Is this gonna be inserted at a later time?
Yep.
Or, okay,
Yeah, we'll come back to organization at a later date. This will go at the top of section 2-3, which will need to be numbered at some point.
all right. Give me a minute so I can save and do all that stuff.
No worries.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know what, Dave, it's sometimes it's confusing in the fact that, so we just voted on this change right here.
Yep.
I think it would have been much more apropos if this change that we voted on was under the discussion of where it should go, you know, so that it made more sense. So
Yeah, I think the reason. Go ahead. No, please finish your thoughts.
So it was confusing to me in the fact that maybe this might mean something else if it were under a different section of discussion, rather than we're assigning this to a group of people within our committee
Yep.
to work on. But I think that it should be agreed, it should be worked on probably outside, but plugged into the format of the discussion that it's relevant to.
Yeah. I think the reason we pulled it out was because we could not come to consensus in the larger group. And so when we had met, I think this was in early December, maybe the 5th or so. We asked the subgroup to come up with some language that was more palatable to the group as a whole. But I don't want to hold us up on other elements. I mean, because we'll just never finish this work. If we worry about where it goes and when it is inserted, we'll never finish the work. So your comments are noted, Mr. Lawler. I will do my very best as we move forward, keep things in order, so that that limits confusion. In those times though that we can't come to consensus but we think that a change is warranted, I reserve the right to pull something out and ask for a working group to come to a consensus offline for us, so we don't do it in session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You got it. Martha, go ahead.
That reminds me of what I've been thinking of related to the changes that we've made. And is there any possibility of having a either a written record of that or online that we can access so that we can see what we have done so far in the context, if possible, of where it is in the charter?
So Michelle and Rob have the document that we've been working on. I'm hesitant to put it online at this point because we have a long way to go, and I don't want to confuse folks with the actual charter versus this, for lack of a better term, redline charter that we are actively working on. So I'm hesitant to put the full document online, simply because I think it would create confusion. But if you want to see where we're at in terms of what work we've done so far, you know, firstly, you can certainly check out our minutes. I do frequently. Michelle is posting minutes to our meetings on the town's website pretty quickly after we vote on them. And she usually includes the changes as they were redlined. But again, you can certainly reach out to Michelle and Rob if you would like to have the full document.
I wasn't proposing that we would go public with it when I said online. I meant just for our committee. In other words, what's in front of us right now, I don't know if there's any way for us to have that when we're, you know, between meetings to access it.
Feel free to reach out to Rob and Michelle if you want to see where we're at any point in time.
Okay, thank you.
I have Rob, and then I have a couple of other questions here in the room. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just gonna say, Martha, all of the changes are articulated in the meeting minutes. So
Oh, yeah,
you have the changes. I'm gonna respectfully ask that you not make any extra work for me.
okay.
Len?
I was just gonna say, when we get through this legislative section, maybe we could get that whole document.
Yep.
Just as a chapter, we don't need the whole thing, but it'd just be nice to see, because I've been trying to take notes, and after a while, it gets a little confusing.
Yeah, so part of the process that I've agreed to with the town manager and our general counsel is that when we complete work on major sections, that I would run that work by them, so we will have to do, at some point, an extract of
Okay.
the work that we've done to this point. I mean, at that point, the document will exist and will be public record, so we can certainly share that out to the rest of the committee,
Okay.
at that point in time. Alan, did you have something as well?
Yeah, a little bit off topic, but just to expedite things, to speed things up when we get into some of these more difficult subchapters. I thought what this committee put together, a subcommittee to speak to section Z, a group went out, came back with some pretty good language and it passed. So I didn't know if there was an appetite, I don't know if it was mentioned to do that with Mr. Pies' motion earlier, which was, I think the core of the motion, everybody's in favor. It's just how we define the document and what goes in the document. I didn't know if there's any appetite to form a small committee, have them do it offline, so the next time it's in front of us, it's a pretty good piece of work that we can make a couple of tweaks to if need be, or we vote it in very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's completely fine. I'll leave that to Larry to sort of chair that. What I would ask is that there'd be no more than 4 members who work with Larry. If you're interested in
Yeah, you have to be interested in doing it, if
Yeah,
you know.
if you're interested in working on that language further, please reach out to Larry.
So you're saying it's voluntary?
It's voluntary, absolutely. I'm not gonna tell anyone what to do. All right, let's move on.
What section are we starting on?
We are starting on 2-4-2.
2-4-2.
I think we do have to come back to 2-4-1 at some point, but I wanna see if we can get some major work done before we.
Did we approve it? We didn't approve it, it's in entirety? For this one?
The only change we made to 2-4-1 was to change the
April, May.
April, May.
Another hour probably.
We slash agencies, or do I have my notes wrong?
We haven't voted it.
We did, yep. December 19th, 9-0.
But
We did not.
we voted that.
Yes.
But we didn't vote to accept the entire, we're holding off on the rest of.
Correct, yep, we're holding off on the rest of that afternoon. So let's go to 2-4-2. I think is a little further down. Right? Is this 2-4-2, Rob?
Got to do a quorum?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what it-
The majority of those, majority mean
God,
I think we're on 2-4-1, so.
It's still on 2-4-1.
yeah, that's one.
so procedures,
Yep.
2-4-1, the representative town meeting shall meet at least twice in the calendar year.
Yep,
First
we want
meeting,
to go to 2-4-2.
Here we
Scroll
are.
down.
Yep,
There it is.
on this document, or rather on the document that I'm working on, it's line 234. That's probably changed in the hard copy that everybody has. 2-4-2 begins with the quorum necessary for the conduct of representative town meeting business, etc.
Yep. Do you want to continue reading, or do you want me to take over? I'm happy to do
No, I'll
either.
keep reading. No, I'll keep reading, sure. So the quorum necessary for the conduct of representative town meeting business shall be 2/3 of the total number of elected representative town meeting members. A majority of those present may adjourn any meeting forthwith to a stated date, time, and place, but no town meeting shall adjourn over the date of an election of town meeting members.
Any thoughts on 2-4-2? Steve?
I have a concern only because I look at the various percentages for various things to occur in town meeting. So in order, as we look at 2-4-4, in order to change the order of the warrant articles, you need a 2/3 vote. But you can adjourn a town meeting with a majority,
Simple majority.
simple majority. It strikes me that something's extraordinary as adjourning town meeting before it's done should be a higher percentage. I think it should be a 2/3 vote, but I open that up for discussion.
Larry, you were raise an issue as well?
I'm believing, and I don't have it with me, but I'm believing that that is, I'm not sure that we can't change it, but I believe that that is either town meeting time or state law about the process of adjourning a meeting. I think if Steve's motion were to pass, we could, it's possible we could supersede. But, I'm
sure we can.
Look, I don't wanna
supersede
get
town
into the
meeting
meat
time,
of,
but you're right.
I'll discuss what he, yeah. That's all, I did, that
Were
was
you
the
gonna bring
only,
up something separate or in response to that?
no, I could respond to what he said, and, a majority. You can't force people to do what they don't want to do, and if a majority says that they want to adjourn town meeting, that's the way it's going to be. They can refuse to
Yep.
vote on all sorts of things.
But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the significance of, you could stop the town meeting with a simple majority, but if you simply want to take and change the order of the warrants, you need 2/3. It seems like it's backwards. It seems like the adjourning the meeting is much more significant than changing the order. Who cares? To be honest with you, who cares about the order unless there's something going on? And I think that's
Yeah.
what Steve is talking about here. My question is either one of those codified in law, or is it just in our charter?
No, it's in, I think. We'd have to, we might wanna pull back because, usually town meeting time has a reference in it to, where it came.
Well, no, is it the fact that it's a simple majority versus 2/3? That's what I'm talking about.
Right,
Is that
exactly.
codified? Forget about what it's doing. Is either one of those things codified in law? And then my other comment, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm talking out of order, but am I? Okay. We talked about changing when the meeting was gonna be held, and we heard at the select board meeting that Derek said we really need to move it because of waiting for the cherry sheet and all the stuff that goes on with that. And so the question is, does it even become more complicated because it said the meeting can't be delayed past an election for town meeting members? So is these, 242, 243, 244, those three sections, I mean, there's some significant changes that's gonna happen in the wording of those, if that's the case. Cause we have to figure out when the election is relative to when town meeting is, and if it's a week apart, possibly the chance of it moving.
Yeah, I would, the only response to that is, if you have an election, you have a different
town
group
meeting,
of people,
right.
and that to
Just
me,
start all over.
yeah.
I pulled up town meeting time. I was hoping that folks would talk more for the first time. I'm not seeing any reference to state law. I'm not seeing, I mean, there are many references to court cases in terms of like what the meaning of the word adjourn is. It doesn't state in here. So,
Well, you're doing that, so do you think it should be, both of them should be 2/3, or so both of them should be simple majorities?
I think adjourning,
Sorry, not that.
I think adjourning town meeting should be a 2/3 majority. Now, I appreciate, Larry, your point that if people don't wanna do it, people don't wanna do it. But ironically, that happens all the time at town meeting. people don't wanna hear from somebody else, they move to close debate. It's a 2/3 majority. So again, the simple majority can't stop town meeting from talking. But it then could simply turn around and say, fine, you know what, if I don't wanna hear you, I'm just gonna adjourn the whole thing. And that still would be allowed to happen. I don't think that should be. Do I think it will happen on a frequent basis? No, of course not. But my ridiculous lawyer brain going through to the, what happens if? So what happens if we have a contentious town meeting article? And a group of people decide, you know what, it's not going the way I want it to go. I'm gonna just stop town meeting and I'm gonna try it again in another way. I think that for something as important as stopping town meeting, where the town is relying on town meeting to go forward and to finish its job, and we've had that marathon session a couple of years ago. And, you know, we rejected it repeatedly. There were multiple calls to stop, and we said, you know what, no, we're gonna keep going because it's our job to finish. And I was glad that we did. But I'm concerned that the time comes in the future where people say, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that. And I think it's too important. I think finishing town meeting, absent an extraordinary circumstance, and we could have gotten to that point where we were literally going, you know what, we're not gonna get done. Okay, we get to that point. But you should be able to, and people who are doing town meeting as town meeting members should understand, this is, it's a couple times a year, and it means you block the day off, the whole day. It means you don't make plans for dinner at 5 o'clock. It means you don't go, oh gee, you know what? I really wanted to watch that football game. It means you gotta block it off. And so I would like to see the.
I'm gonna need a legal consultation here.
Sure.
What do these words say?
CNAD,
All right,
to
so
another day.
to dissolve or to adjourn CNAD is a motion.
CNAD is without day. That's without day. So in other words, without a specifics.
So interestingly, according to town meeting time, that this motion requires a second and a majority vote. We don't do a second in town, do we? Yeah, we don't do. So we're already not following town meeting time.
Okay, that's
So I
fine.
think that so it does say that,
So you're saying 242, the majority is codified in law?
no,
No.
No,
this
it's not.
is the rules of order
Oh, I see.
that town meeting in Plymouth operates under, unless we've specified a rule that is in conflict here that would supersede that.
Right.
So, cannot be debated, amended or reconsidered. So it can't interrupt a speaker. So we're already out of step with town meeting time. So I think we can
Okay,
change the quantum of vote. Because, and there's no reference in here as to why that is. So like, there's not a court case, there's not a general law that's referenced here. I'm of the opinion that it's the town that can make that decision through town meeting on our recommendation, if we so choose.
well, there are 2 points I'm doing what we're telling COPC to do, technical clarification. Do we really want to say a majority of those present or a majority of those voting?
Well, that's a semantic.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's not. It's.
Well, but
He's right.
Right, right, 'cause they're not in the right-
It should always be a majority of those
voting,
voting,
because
because that would still include abstentions.
So do you want to add that to your motion?
So I would say 2/3.
Oh, I'm
But I
sorry.
would say, yes, that it should change to be 2/3 of those, or you can say present and voting. That's always.
so if you
Hang
want.
hang on a second,
I'm
I have Rob and Betty,
Oh, I'm sorry.
online, they've been waiting patiently, so I'm gonna go to Rob first.
Got out of sight, out of mind.
Thanks, Dave. I kind of feel like, so if there needs to be a quorum of town meeting members present to conduct the business of town meeting, which is 2/3, then then there's already a quorum present to adjourn town meeting. So I'm not exactly sure why we're having the conversation of 2/3. Because that's what I'm hearing. So if I'm misunderstanding it, then please explain. But like I said, I feel like we're having a conversation of two-thirds. You know, 2/3 needs to be present to conduct business, 2/3 needs to be present to adjourn the meeting, 2/3, I mean, it's an awful lot of thirds. If you understand what I'm saying, I think the language that is here, 2-4-2, I think it's sufficient enough.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you, Rob, in that I think the language is sufficient. I think there is some confusion, I'll concede, in the notion of those present versus those voting. So you could have 100 town meeting members in the building. That means you need 51 of them to adjourn, right?
Versus
51
66.
votes. Now, if we're talking about voting, it would only be 25 of those 50 people who did vote, 26 of those 50 people who did vote. So I'm of the mind that we keep it at present, because that necessarily requires a higher threshold. The 2/3 piece, I'm in a position right now where I am willing to trust my fellow town meeting members. We have not adjourned prior to the conclusion of business since I've joined town meeting. I will admit that has only been 2 years. So I'm sure it's happened in longer memory than mine. But I do think that we've stuck around, and we've had some bumps in the road for sure. But we did the hard work to get our fellow town meeting members back so that we could conclude business when we lost our quorum. I think it was last October. So I'm willing to follow town meeting times process. I will, however, if I am in a town meeting where we're requested to adjourn prior to the conclusion of business, I'm pulling this bad boy out and saying to the moderator that it needs a second. And I'm gonna force someone to stand up and say they don't wanna finish the job.
I'm telling you, it won't work. I've tried that. I bought the same book. It doesn't work.
Can I ask for just clarification what you said?
Let me go to Betty,
Okay.
because she's,
Mr. Tripoletti's gonna
again,
listen to
been
me.
patient. Go ahead, Betty.
You did that, she didn't answer.
You there, Betty?
Yep, I'm here. So I'm actually a little confused. So there is no motion on the floor to accept
Correct.
this language, correct?
Correct.
So we're just in a discussion and there is no decision to be made because I'm hearing 2/3, no thirds. Personally, I think the section is fine the way it is. So I just wanted to clarify like where we're at.
Yeah, we have no motion on the table. Let me ask this, is there a desire for a motion? Will someone make a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to keep it the same.
Well,
Second,
we
don't have to do that.
don't need to do that. I would ask that you withdraw that, both of you. Because if we don't have a motion to change it, there's no reason for me to take a vote. So would you please withdraw your motion?
It depends. No, I'm kidding. Yes, I will withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Excellent. It seems as though there is not, so I'm gonna move on to 2-4-3.
Can I just ask you
Go
for
ahead.
clarification what you said, to make sure I understand?
Yep,
So you have 100, let's say the 2/3 of the town meeting members is 100 people, you have 100 people in attendance. So to end the meeting, you need 51, to change the order, you need 66. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay,
Well,
that's-
hold on.
We'll get to 2-4-4.
well, I know, I'm just,
Well, no, because it's present and voting in that one, so voting is a consideration, so if only 5 people vote, you need 3 of them to make that happen.
is that what that said?
I don't wanna belabor, but how the hell are we supposed to know who's present? I mean,
So,
So you used to know who was
by-
present because you were physically there. No longer, because now you're just a name on
but
the
we don't
screen.
know, present in the men's room, present
Right.
in the building. The only way that we really know that somebody is present is when they vote. And what I think if we're going to be,
Well,
if we're going to be clear, we might want to change present to voting.
well, I was gonna upset the apple cart. The way town meeting is run today, this is way out of line. Because it's a different process today of the way it's run. It's not just simply run by showing up. You can be present at the town meeting without physically being there. You get the way you get the vote today, it talks about, I know we're jumping to another thing. There is no more secret ballot. It's all, everybody gets to see who voted, who didn't vote, and who wasn't there and all this stuff. So I hate to say this, I think these three sections need a lot of work to be consistent the way the town meeting is being run. It's got nothing, this is of the old days when everybody was sitting in the audience and everything. And the motivator not to delay the meeting is the cost of having to recreate the meeting in the way it was a couple of days later. Plus, throw another cog in the wheel or whatever, stick in the cog. Is the town's business getting to be too much to do in a 12-hour day? Does town meeting now have to be planned to be more than one day?
That's not for us to decide, that's.
No, I know, but I mean, is that in the way the voting of deciding things that, you know, to delay it and all this stuff? So I don't know, I'm just throwing those out there. I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
come to Alan, because he's been,
Well, just quickly, because Mr. Levin sort of touched on it, and I'm in Mr. Pies' camp, present, is that even the right word?
Right.
We haven't done anything yet, but later on, when we add a virtual component to this charter, present, does that mean you're physically in the building voting, or you're present at the meeting? Through a hybrid or through, what's the system that we use, Zoom
Yeah.
and, V-Voter. Maybe present isn't the word, get rid of the word present.
Yeah, I think, I think that we've interpreted present in the updated, what Alan's saying. Present means that you can either be physically there or you can be logged in, bad word. But I think the issue isn't so much that, the issue is, since we don't know what present means, we don't know if someone's there. The word present probably should be changed to voting in this instance.
Or you could say.
I would suggest it's present and voting if, we're gonna make a change.
That's fine.
Although I don't know that we need to.
But how can you vote if you're not present?
President, right?
You can vote.
No, no,
without
present
present,
solves
you
the
can
problem,
present
get rid of
and
the
not
word.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to believe. So you're saying that if there's 100 people there and only 5 people vote to end the meeting, they only need 3 out of the 5?
Yeah,
That's how that would work.
So the rest, the other 95 just abstain or say,
Either say
No.
don't vote at
Don't
all.
vote at all.
no,
They don't raise their hand.
an abstention is a vote. That would probably.
It's a vote to go to the majority. though.
Yeah, but, yeah, so,
But we have a process now. It used to be that you had a choice. If you were there, you would be called upon. It would be a roll call vote. And you have to answer yay, nay, abstain. There was
do
no,
that now.
but we don't, because we don't do an actual roll call. Now, we could require an actual roll call.
We would be very popular.
So you don't.
Well, that's it. If someone really wants to close early, then you know what? Put up or shut up.
Right.
You don't get to sit there and go, or we may turn around and find that somebody has been doing what I know some do, which is they log in and then they go disappear for a while. They have their sandwich, they come back for another vote.
Yep, my contention though is that if you don't like that, vote that person out of office.
But you won't know that
You
they're
don't
doing it.
know.
You don't know that
You
they're
don't
doing it.
know.
Then how do we
I'm just trying, sorry, I'm pretty nice with this.
know? Here's what I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna pull things back here.
I'm gonna make
Is,
a-
is there a motion to change the language in 2-4-3?
I have a motion.
Please make your motion.
President should say in person or remotely, to be consistent with our current process.
Is there a second?
I may be just off the wild end of the dock or whatever. Is that,
I think that sounds like something that would make a good things to define at some point, but I don't know that we necessarily, that would.
Okay, that's fine.
Something else.
Would you plan the second?
No, I thought you were.
Then hearing and seeing no second,
Okay.
we will move on. Is there another motion on this?
I'd like to, move that we, add the word "and voting" after the word "present."
Is there a second to that?
I will second that.
Mr. Pizer has made the motion to add under 2-4-2, after the words "of those present," he is asking to add "and voting." And Mr. Costello has seconded the motion. Is there further discussion?
I'd like, so, Mr. Pizer,
Dave?
what do you think that accomplishes?
yeah, that's what it is.
I'll be with you in a second, Rob.
I think that there's some, I mean, there are various ways of ending a meeting. One is a lack of quorum. And you can go into that, but, the reality of the situation is that town meeting members tend to stay. And this simply clarifies, since my problem is that the word "present," we don't know who's present. We do know who's voting.
I'll say it also matches 2-4-3,
Yeah.
2-4-4, which says that the order can only be changed by those present and voting. So I have Betty, then Rob.
I'm sorry. So here, and I don't know how to explain this, but in my mind, if you're at town meeting, whether you're in person or online, it's your duty to vote. And listening to all these ways that town meeting can go about, only having 5 people vote, or I mean, I think there should be something in there that says that if you're a town meeting member and you're at town meeting, you need to vote yes, no, or abstain. I don't think it's like 100 people can be there and only 5 people decide to vote and there go. I mean, in my opinion, it just gives them the ability to not be very good at what they've actually been elected to do to represent the people.
Yep, I understand and I agree with you, Betty, in principle. I think the problem is that voting is a privilege afforded by the election that you've won. So we can't force someone to act on a privilege. And again, I'll go back to, if someone has a record of not voting at town meeting, the people of this town should vote that person. I have, Ben, do you have a follow-up?
No.
Excellent. Rob?
So in one way or another, over time, I've been attending town meetings since I was 7 years old. Believe it or not, Larry can probably attest to some of that. Never in my recollection has there been any secret ballot at all. It's been a voice vote. It has not been, I don't ever remember a roll call vote, but I do remember voice votes in town meeting. Those present and voting, the phrase "those present and voting" is stated in section 2-4-4. I don't think we need that redundancy. I mean, part of what we're trying to do here is eliminate redundancy. So I certainly don't think we need to create it. I really think that as a group right now, we're spinning our wheels over syntax and semantics that we just don't need to do. The language as it is, believe it or not, is sufficient enough.
So let me just pause it for a second there, Rob. So these are separate clauses. So if we don't add "and voting" to the section that we're talking about, 2-4-2,
There's
which
inconsistency.
requires, a majority to adjourn, that's not covered by the and voting in 2-4-4, which is, in regards to, changing the order of, warrant articles. So the and voting part in 2-4-4 doesn't impact 2-4-2. I will say this, I am satisfied with the language as it appears. I am not in favor of, adding and voting in here. So I plan to vote no, for the various reasons that I've stated. But I think that if we don't make the change, it's not covered, by 2-4-4. So I apologize for interrupting, but I want to make that clarification. Please, finish your comments.
No, I was just about done. For my own, I plan on voting no as well, but just for my own sanity, which is waning quickly, where is that phrase going to go?
I don't think, I think we're gonna vote in just a second here. Mr. Waller has his hand up, so I'll come to him next, and I anticipate that will be, the last comment, because I think we've,
Beat it to
exhausted this, conversation. But to answer your question, Rob, it doesn't need to go anywhere, if we vote it down. So, Mr. Waller, do you have some input here?
Yes, I do. Move the question.
Thank you, sir. All right, I will call the roll. Mr. Bolton, if you had a vote?
No.
Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco?
No.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson?
No.
Mr. Lawler? Mr. Lawler?
We are voting to not put that language into the section, correct?
A no vote would be to not include it in the section.
No.
Mr. Levin?
And we're just talking about and voting, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Pfizer?
Yes.
Ms. Botran?
Yes,
Mr. Zuccarelli?
No.
And I as well. The motion fails, those in favor were 4 and those against were 5. So we'll move on now to 2-4-3. The representative town meeting shall always operate in open session and secret ballots should not be allowed. I please hope that we are not going to make changes to that. Is there any appetite to change 2-4-3? Excellent. Hearing and seeing none, I will move on to 2-4-4. The order of consideration of the articles of the warrant may be changed by a 2/3 vote of those present and voting. Is there any appetite to change the language in 2-4-4?
Is it necessary?
Yeah,
None of what we've done is necessary. Go ahead,
yeah,
Joe.
well, it's necessary because of, aggregated, articles.
Okay.
When we want to disaggregate and vote on a specific article, by itself.
Well, that's not what this is for. This is not a motion to separate. This is about changing the order on which we can.
I know, but I was asking is it even necessary that they be able to vote for that? He's explaining to me why.
Yeah.
Well, but the same principle, I think. Someone may want to move articles around, so that, a predecessor article could get voted on
Yep.
instead of a main thought, if you will.
Sure.
So those kinds of flexibilities, I think, are appropriate.
Okay.
It sounds like there's no,
I would just say, if you wanted to make it more flexible, then you would make it a majority vote rather than a 2/3 vote, that's all.
is anyone interested in making that motion?
I'm not allowed to.
What was the word you used, more flexible?
Yeah,
Yeah, it only needs 51. If my example of 100 only needs 51 versus 66.
Yeah.
I think the bar should be high if you wanna start moving around
Yeah,
articles.
well, it is.
Yeah.
But hearing and seeing that there is not an appetite, I will move on. We are at 2-4-5. representative town meeting may adopt rules and regulations relating to its procedures and its methods of operation.
I apologize. I don't believe the town meeting can bind. It can bind the meeting at which a vote is taken.
Yep.
But I don't believe that it can legally bind a meeting beyond that meeting, and yet that's what we are doing now. That is the present practice, that if a town meeting in April of 2022 says town meeting members shall speak first, and we get to 2024, that motion is in effect. That's not legal. And I don't care because it's fine with me, but it isn't legal.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that, and I've said this in open session here, I think and I said it in the COPC, we need to, Article 1 should always be an adoption of rules, and if we don't change the rules, then we don't have an Article 1, there's no action, there's no motion, no action. But if we are gonna change the rules, for example, if we want to, our current practice, which has been over many years, has been that town meeting members speak first. That is a rule that was adopted a long time ago, that has just been kept in place since that time in 2012 or something like that.
So I don't think we even need to make it an article, and I think this should merely, we can drop this and communicate to the moderator that our opinion is that he does various motions, you know, when the adjourned sessions will be or something like that. He can also have a motion to continue the previous rules of town meeting at that point,
Yeah, for sure.
but.
Well, a motion, an
Well,
article.
but you're saying something different, I think. I mean, you're saying adopt the rules at every meeting?
Yes,
Yeah.
And what's the, what would be the difference if you didn't adopt them? We have a blank slate at the beginning of that meeting?
yeah. Well, it would not be a blank slate, it would be town meeting.
Oh, we would right back to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other
Anything in
words-
the previous meetings that was ever voted on as a rule, such as order of who speaks.
Yep,
Is null and void.
It's null and void.
yep.
All right, I'm fine. I have no objection to that.
So do you have a motion that you'd like to?
No, as a matter of fact, I think we leave that there because this is appropriate that we should be able to make rules for town meeting members, we being town meeting
Yes.
members. But I think that separately, we will invest in our excellent chair, the opportunity to speak to the moderator about the fact that we're noting that we see a questionable practice.
Well, you know, if that's the case, then I think it ought to be in here.
Yes.
I'm perfectly, I agree with Joe. I think that, you know, you can change that to say that, representative town meeting shall, at each representative town
Right.
meeting,
Yeah.
adopt rules and regulations. You're basically telling them, at every meeting, you have to do this. Article 1, we hereby adopt it. We can adopt the same, we can adopt the last ones from last, we adopt the following changes. We created as part of the COPC, this process of telling them they needed to review the rules before town meeting and come up with any changes if they're going to. That's the whole point. They do that, they can come back and say, meet with the town moderator and say, Mr. Moderator, we've gone through the rules, we're good with them. Or Mr. Moderator, we've gone through the rules, we think these 2 or 3 things should be changed.
But do we have to say that no rules will carry forward? Well, the fact that.
So by definition, if we say they shall do it in
I
each
see what you're
meeting,
saying.
it's a must.
Clean slate.
It's in our charter, they have to do it.
It's an interim.
Yeah, so I would suggest, Rob, if you wouldn't mind, doing your magic while I say this, because I think Joe, you're gonna make this motion.
So moved.
But I'm gonna,
Include.
let me say let me put to words what we're talking
All right.
about.
It's something, it's a bit.
So the representative town meeting, cross out the word may, shall adopt rules and regulations relating to its procedures and methods of operation. Oh, no, sorry, I was continuing to read, sorry, no, just go back to the word shall, Rob, delete everything back to the word shall, because I was reading what are already in, what's already there too. Sorry, that was my fault. So we're putting the word shall in,
And striking may.
And striking may.
Yeah.
And then after the word operation,
At the end of the sentence,
he's gonna strike out, strike like that. So I'll keep talking and then you can ask me to repeat myself, just so that we're on the same page. So at the end of the sentence, after the word operation, we'll add in at each town meeting. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what I thought you said.
Is that how we
Right.
feel here in the room?
Yeah, that's good.
And then I have another thing to say before I come to you, Larry. So, after operation, you put in at each town meeting. And then a new sentence,
are we capitalize the town meeting?
we'll come back to that, okay? Yeah, we'll come back to those sorts of things. In the event that town meeting chooses not to adopt amended rules and regulations, comma, town meeting time rules,
Apply.
Town meeting time rules?
yeah, the word rules.
That'll be capital in the.
Doesn't say you're gonna capitalizing some of that.
Yeah, we capitalize town meeting time,
A meeting time rules shall apply.
shall apply.
Right.
Two questions. Okay.
Let's just get this out here. After rules, it would be shall apply.
Town meeting. Has he got that right, or has he got it backwards?
Nope, he's got it. Alright, so I'm gonna come to you, Larry, you have some questions.
Okay. Amended chooses not to adopt rules and regulations. Did you don't, it sounds as though if we don't amend it, then,
I'm fine, take out the word amended.
and the only other question I have, and this is only based on what we've been doing. The moderator, when we've had an annual and a special on the same day, has treated that as one town meeting. And it works for me, but if it's okay with you, in other words, he doesn't always go out and do all the boilerplate.
Yep, the
And like.
procedural motion.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that at the beginning, when we switch back and forth from the annual to the special, that we should take that vote again, or?
I don't think we need to, I think
Good.
we can operate as
Uh,
we have.
Okay, I'm fine.
I'm now a little upset at myself, because we're saying that they shall do it, but then we're also giving them the opportunity to not do it. Because we're saying in the event that they don't do it.
Can I be able to get what's time rules?
Town meeting time is this book right here. This is, so town meeting time, for those who don't know, either here or at home, town meeting time is a rules of procedure, handbook for, that has been developed by the Town Moderators Association here in Massachusetts. It's, designed to, organize the work that's done at town meeting. There are other rules of operation, for example, one of the most popular ones, Robert's Rules of Order. But we in Plymouth and many of the town meetings in Massachusetts use town meeting time. So I'm gonna look to you, Steve, about what I just said, since you're our free legal advice here. I've told them that they have to do it, but then I've also given them the option to not do it, it seems. What are your thoughts?
I think you're right. I think to some degree, by simply telling them they have to do it. If they don't do it, then theoretically, town meeting is void. And so that would be, I think, a far bigger risk for them versus to go, well, we don't feel like dealing with it this time, so we'll just go back to town meeting time, which in and of itself, since we rarely follow town meeting time even when we're supposed to, in a lot of instances, because of the hyper-technical nature of some of the provisions, could create even bigger problems. I personally would like to just simply say, you shall do it. Because we created this entire mechanism, as I said, with the COPC, working with the moderator to define what rules make sense for town meeting and to go forward. And I think town meeting should, as Larry has pointed out, town meeting should be adopting its rules for each town meeting. You shouldn't be leaving this kind of out there. And this also, I think, to some degree as well, will cause people to engage. If you're a town meeting member and you go, you know, at last town meeting, I didn't get to speak because of this, this, and this. I don't like that rule. Well, now you got a chance to really argue about it as you're going up there and creating a new rule.
I am persuaded by what Steve says, because what if a moderator said, I'm going to rule, I mean, the only reason we follow town meeting time is the moderator says that's what we're going to do. That was not a town meeting vote. If the moderator got up at a town meeting and said, we're going to follow Robert's Rules of Order, and this last sentence that you suggested is in there, you know, that's binding us to something we don't, but I like your first sentence, I like the shall, and the at each town meeting, that's
Yep.
excellent, but I think we might wanna leave out the second sentence.
I'm in agreement with you on my own words, but I want to hear it from Alan before. we
What,
take-
I just racked my brain on this whole thing. How many rules and regulations do we have? I only know of the speaking,
There are
the
five,
order of speaking.
yeah, there are 5 or 6 that were adopted.
And you said, I think in an earlier meeting, that's somewhere in the town clerk's office.
Right,
She has a record of that. Or you had a record of it. Somebody had a record at one time.
I did, yeah.
So you're suggesting that we shall re-adopt those at the beginning of every town meeting, yeah?
Yeah.
But we have to, and that's fine, yeah, but somebody has to show me those 5 rules and
And
regulations.
I think that this makes us have to do that too.
Yeah.
Because I bet there are a whole bunch of town meeting members who don't know what those 5 rules are. So.
I'm one of them.
You're one of 162.
And I think we've just become used to, moderator Fletty runs a good meeting, so
Yeah.
I think we've just.
Used to him doing all the heavy
Become
lifting.
trusting with him, but someday, whether that's in 3 years or another 30.
Right.
Mr. Trifletti will not be the moderator for the town of Plymouth, so I think making the town meeting stand up and say this is how we're gonna operate is not necessarily a bad thing.
But the word methods of operation or procedures is not another word for town meeting times.
No. Well, so town meeting time is a rule, it's a rules of order,
Yeah,
which dictates your procedures and operations.
like Robert's rules.
So it's that, so leaving it at that. I think what would have to happen is one of two things. We either have to, at each town meeting, adopt town meeting time. Or adopt town meeting time, except as otherwise stated. So for example, if we adopt town meeting time, but we wanna make it that only town meeting members can talk. And I'm not suggesting that's something we should do, but if that's how we wanted to proceed, we would adopt town meeting time except for that additional rule. Does that make sense?
Something we might put in a handbook.
That handbook will be ever changing, I think. All right, so I am comfortable deleting the in the event sentence, Rob. It sounds like that's how the room feels as well. Seeing and hearing no one else online or in person, Mr. Hutchinson, would you make a motion that we amend 2-4-5 as shown on the screen?
So moved.
And is there a second? Mr. Hutchinson makes the motion. It's been seconded by Mr. Pizer. I will call the roll. Mr. Bolton, if you had a vote. Yes. Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer.
Yes,
Ms. Botrain,
Yes,
Mr. Zuccaroli,
Yes,
and I vote yes as well. We have reached our first unanimous vote tonight.
Hey, and I think on that note,
I'm
we're
quite
out of
proud of us.
It's only 5 after 8.
I'd like to continue just a little bit. Is there any objection?
I just need to get to the library by 9.
Okay,
Yeah, 2
Uh,
hours is a sufficient amount of time, don't you think?
I am committed to continuing, but I'm certainly sensitive to folks' time. Is there a motion to table the remainder of our discussion?
Why don't we just see if we can get,
Is it seconded?
Yes.
All right, well, so Mr. Zuccaroli has made the motion. Ms. Cavaco has seconded. I don't think we need to discuss it because people feel how they feel on this matter. Mr. Bulletin, if you had a vote.
no,
Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
No,
Mr. Hutchinson,
No,
Mr. Lawler,
No,
Mr. Levin,
no,
Mr. Pizer,
no,
Ms. Botrain,
no,
Mr. Zuccaroli.
yes,
And I vote no as well. The motion fails with 7 opposed and 2 in favor. So we'll continue our discussion on 2-4-6. An election
how much
roll.
how much longer do you anticipate us going?
I think we could probably bang out the rest of 2-4 and I think that would be sufficient for folks. I can't say on timing.
let's read through it.
Let's go to 2-4-6. Which says an electronic roll call vote shall be required for all final main motions on every warrant article and on matters with respect to the following subjects: adoption or amendment of zoning bylaws, adoption or amendment of general bylaws, and fiscal matters which are defined as any appropriation, borrowing, fund transfer, or the creation of or reauthorization of such enterprise or revolving funds as may be authorized by state law. Provided, however, that in the event of a vote, which a moderator reasonably believes is likely to be near unanimous, and if you wouldn't mind scrolling down,
The moderator, sorry.
Rob. The moderator may elect to take a verbal roll call for only those voting in the minority. In the event that the electronic voting system is unavailable or determined in the moderator's sole discretion to be malfunctioning, the moderator may provide for a manual roll call vote in place of an electronic roll call. Mr. Law, you have your hand up.
yes, I do, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I think we should just have something as plain and simple as can you move that up, Rob, a bit? Where we started?
Back to the 246.
Yeah. So it's just saying an electronic roll call vote shall be required for all final main motions. Period, and strike the rest.
Is that your motion?
Yes,
Is there a second?
I'd like to suggest an amendment.
Well, hang on, let's see if it gets, is there a second?
Oh, I'll second.
It's been seconded. There's a request for a friendly amendment from Mr. Bulletin.
I'd like to suggest that we just say a roll call vote and allow and include in there on all those motions and indicate that an electronic roll call is permitted. So rather than address, because when we say we're doing it as now we're getting very specifically into the
Not
how.
Right.
And I don't know in 5 years whether we go from something from an electronic roll call to some other system. I'd rather just allow a roll call vote of any type as deemed appropriate.
How about this? A roll call vote shall be required for all final main motions, electronic or otherwise.
Yeah, I'm good with that. That would be the suggestion, Tim.
So my guess is, my
I'm
guess is that
good,
this.
I'm good, I'm good.
My guess was that this was written, when we first started doing electronic votes. And there were probably folks who were,
Nervous, right.
upset or nervous that it would not be properly functioning, or that it would, that the vote would not be, of, the fidelity of the vote might be called into question. And so, it looks like, someone cobbled together a whole bunch of exemptions to when
Use
we would
cases,
have,
right.
Conditions, yeah.
an electronic roll call vote. I'm in agreement that we should say, maybe it's that we should say something to the effect of an electronic vote shall constitute a roll call vote.
Well, so I like Len's line.
Can you restate what
I
you
like,
said?
I like Lenny's, whatever Lenny had there, I like and I'm willing to go with.
Can you restate it for the record, Lynn?
Just say it again, Lenny.
I'm going. A roll call vote shall be required for all final main motions, electronic or otherwise.
I would actually put electronic or otherwise right after the word, a roll call vote, comma, electronic
there?
or otherwise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay,
So
so,
that, say.
So, Rob-
Whatever constitute, we allow that everything that constitutes a roll call vote is defined as.
so, Tim, do you accept that amendment?
Whatever Steve just said.
If you accept Len's, I'm gonna accept if you accept Len's,
Right.
amendment.
Right.
But then Steve said something, Steve,
Moved it. I'm gonna, wait a minute, I'll say it again.
Mr. Levin is sponsoring this amendment.
Okay, I'll say it again.
all right.
A roll call vote, a roll call vote, electronic or otherwise, shall be required for all final main motions.
You like that, Tim?
I love it.
Excellent. And, Mr. Levin, I believe you seconded. Is that right?
Yes,
All right, so you maintain your second with your own suggestion.
yes.
Excellent. All right, so we've gone through, through the process here. So what would happen, Rob, is we strike the word electronic, which it seems as though you're doing. I want to get it on screen before we start discussion. So after the word article, on line 249, you would put a period.
And then from there to the end, you strike.
And then the rest of it, you strike. I'll come to you in a second, Larry. I just want to get it on the screen.
Hurry up, Larry's gonna have a corner.
So the remainder of 2-4-6 gets stricken. I think we're just about there. So, Mr. Pye.
Okay, first of all, I hate this. I think that there are plenty of times when town meeting could actually have a voice vote. And there's no need for this. That aside, I know when I'm going to lose and I'm not gonna push that. The question that I had, just so we understand what we're doing, main motions, Article 9, traditionally at town meeting, a main motion, is all of the capital items. And what we're saying then is if someone has, I don't know, a $12 million item that is being discussed separately, you're eliminating the requirement of an electronic vote for that. And if you're satisfied with that, I don't care.
So may I?
Yeah.
So you're implying, you're suggesting we take the word may now?
No, I'm just, I mean, if, the way this whole thing happened is, there were a whole bunch of places, people wanted to make sure that there were.
I understand
electronic
that.
Votes.
I hear what you're saying, Larry. I'm gonna make you more upset. So Rob, could you scroll back up? To the beginning of the section. So I am going to offer a friendly amendment based on what Larry said. And I hope that Mr. Lawler and Mr. Levin will maintain their motion in a second, that we also strike the word main from this section, so that we do a roll call vote, whether it's by the voter system or by voice on every motion that goes before town meeting. Because I think we owe it to the people of this town to show them where their representatives made decisions.
And do you want to take a final and main?
No, just me.
I don't know what the difference is of a final motion. We don't have to.
Well, a final main motion would be if it was amended at some point. So I guess, yeah, final and main, because it would be all motions. So what I'm saying is all motions, so all motions, so strike the words final and main. Mr. Lawler, do you accept that amendment? You maintain your first by means of a thumbs up, I will state for the record. Mr. Levin, your second?
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So what you're suggesting is the fact that it says motion, it doesn't define motions. We're leaving motions just as in a general term.
Any damn
Well,
motions that we. vote
every
on.
motion.
Damn motion.
Yeah.
I stand second.
Excellent. Mr. Lawler, I see your electronic hand up. Do you have?
Oh,
any-
I'm sorry.
Mr. Zuccaroli, I see your hand up.
I think he's getting into the stuff.
Yeah, this is just an observation. This has nothing to do with this. If we're going to continue this meeting beyond 2 hours, then I'm going to suggest that we stay focused and that we stay on task and we leave the jokes to a side. 2
Thank you.
hours. Thank you.
I agree. Can you scroll down just a bit? Because I think we're about to vote. I just want to make sure that we're also striking out that remaining sentence about the moderator's sole discretion, because the way that the new section would read is that the moderator could make it a manual roll call as well. So that becomes superfluous. So the motion is to strike the remainder of
In the event that the electronic voting system is unavailable, etc.
Yep. All right, there's some labor in this one, but I think we've got there. Is there further discussion?
Just fix the word otherwise. It's a one word.
We're striking this though.
He's striking it.
Yeah.
Good.
Up
Can you
top.
scroll up real quick, Rob?
There.
Oh, otherwise is one word. And then we're there. All right, so the motion before us, unless there's further discussion, is to amend 2-4-6, striking all language except for what was on screen.
Okay,
Can you scroll back up, Rob?
Yeah.
Sorry. So under this recommendation, 2-4-6 would now read: a roll call vote, electronic or otherwise, shall be required on all motions on every warrant article.
We want on every warrant article, not just motions?
We did motions, we would then be able to eliminate 2-4-7 completely.
Right.
I'm fine with amending this to also strike the words on every warrant article. Because then that would encompass every motion that goes before town meeting. Mr. Lawler, would you maintain your?
I agree.
In your second.
Let me just read this again because I marked it up. Yes.
Excellent. So the final motion here is to change 2-4-6 to state a roll call vote, electronic or otherwise, shall be required on all motions, period.
Perfect.
Seeing and hearing no further discussion, I will call the roll. 2-4-6. All right. Mr. Bolton, if you had a vote, how would you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levitt,
Yes.
Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Ms. Votrang,
yes,
Mr. Zuccarelli,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. 2 in a row, baby. We got 2 unanimous votes. All right, moving on to 2-7, it's
4-7.
it's 2-4-7, it speaks to an electronic roll call vote. We have, since we have changed, 2-4-6 to require all motions, to go to an electronic, excuse me, to go to a roll call vote. Is there a motion to eliminate 2-4-7?
I so moved.
Motion.
I saw Larry's hand go up first. Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Lawler seconds it. Is there any discussion on the matter? Hearing and seeing none, I will go to the roll call. Mr. Bulletin,
Yes.
if you had a vote, it would be yes. Mr. Hamlin is not present. Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Piper,
Yes.
Ms. Votrang,
yes,
Mr. Zuccarelli,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well, a third in a row. I'm very proud of this. At this point, I will ask if folks wish to continue or if they wish to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Piper has, well, let me rephrase that. If you wish to table the remainder of our discussion. Mr. Piper makes that motion. And is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. I do have some new business, so after I call the roll, I ask that folks hang around just for me to be able to do that. So for tabling our discussion items, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bulletin.
Sure, why not?
So I'll count that as a yes. Mr. Hanlon is not present. Ms. Cavaco.
Yes.
Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Levin.
Yes.
Mr. Piper.
Yes.
Ms. Votrang.
yes.
Mr. Zuccarelli.
Yes.
And I'm gonna spoil our 4th in a row and I'm gonna vote. So, all right, so we've tabled the remainder of our discussion items for the night. I will go through the rest of our agenda quickly. Any new business to discuss? Any old business? I do have some old business. At our last meeting, I suggested that we need to move to a more frequent meeting schedule. And that if you were if you had any feelings, one way or the other on the matter, that you reach out to me. I heard from one person who suggested that they are ready for as many meetings as we need to get the job done. And so what I plan to do is to schedule a Zoom meeting for January 9th. It will be Zoom only, not in person. That is next Tuesday.
I can't be here.
I can. I mean, I would hope that if you could, you give us that week off because I
Sure.
scheduled things and I can reschedule.
Yep, so. Other folks, so I have 2 full members who aren't able to be present. Are there other folks?
I can make it.
Nope.
That's the third.
If I wanted a weekly meeting, I'd be on the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I think I already did, actually.
Okay, that's fair. I do think that we need to do the work that we've been selected to do, and if you cannot make it, that's fine. I'd ask though, if can either of you make the 9th?
No.
Okay,
I can make the 9th, but I'd rather not.
Make the night.
so we could have a quorum, but considering the overwhelming feeling that the 9th is not feasible, I will work with Michelle on scheduling a meeting for later in January. So our next meeting will be January 16th. I would
January
like for you folks.
Dave, Dave, January 16th is
Yeah.
a joint meeting between the Advisory and Finance Committee, the school committee, and the select board. It's budget season.
Okay, that would take out you and, Mr. Lawler. But we do have two alternates who could fill in that role. Rob, you and I would need to talk about, how I can keep your work moving forward, as the clerk, and we'll figure that out.
So after the 16th, what are we talking about?
So I'm gonna ask that folks hold, the 23rd, which is the following Tuesday, so that we can schedule a meeting. I'll work with Michelle on whether that'll be in person or by Zoom.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawler.
I would really like to be involved in the next meeting. Is there any alternative to the 16th?
I cannot adjourn this meeting for 3 weeks. I think we are already dangerously close to not finishing our work in a timely manner. The only way that I'll cancel a meeting, as I've stated before, is if I lose quorum. I appreciate you wanting to be involved. I want everyone involved, but I need, as the chairman of this committee, I need to keep the work moving forward.
All right, sir.
So after the 23rd, what are you thinking about? Going to weekly?
I think we can have that discussion. If folks don't think that weekly is feasible to them, please let me know. In the absence of such feedback, I will move us to a weekly schedule.
At least 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe?
I would second your, sentiment, about us taking as much time as we need to get our work done. Even if it's gonna extend the schedule of this committee, beyond, the months that have been predicted.
Yeah,
We need to do this right,
Yeah.
I think.
Right, because our date is not next October, our date is next August. So we have to, this has to go before town meeting.
Or earlier, yeah.
Right.
yeah.
I don't know that we have a date.
Well,
I think we've got a self-imposed date, but I don't know that we actually have a date from.
We do, that's right. But I think that an October 2024 town meeting is feasible if we follow that.
Just reinforcing your sentiment is, I think it's important that we do it right.
Yes.
Secondly is that Mrs. Cavaco, at our last meeting, brought up a request to, reorganize for clarity. And I actually submitted, a rewrite of chapter 2 of what we're just going over right now. That could structurally achieve such an objective, which is to say a rewrite for clarity.
Yep.
You wouldn't have to change the content. Things that we've already talked through stay the same, but you could rearrange, for example, for the town clerk to all be in one section.
Yep.
All of that, and I would like to put that on the table.
Yeah.
Just to get it, in motion before we get done with chapter 2.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do, Joe, is for you and me to connect outside.
Yeah, that's
here.
fine.
And I think, so your what I think will be your motion is the structural
Yeah.
things, the renumbering of stuff that we've already done. So if you and I can work outside of this, I think we can come up with a motion that we will have ready to go for like the day we finish chapter 2, we can.
That'd be fun. We could include Larry.
Larry, you are welcome to join us. I'd love it.
And we'll put it all in the hand.
Yeah. Is there any other old business?
Dave, one of the things that I had mentioned before is that if we know that there are sections that all of us know, we all have reviewed the old charter, or the charter that we're working from now, the failed charter that didn't pass. I think if we start addressing things that we knew or know are problematic, and then kind of go back to the rest of it, I think it's gonna save a lot of time. Cause we're nitpicking through things that, and I'm not saying they aren't substantial, but there are, in my opinion, and I know I have a couple of them, that are some glaring issues.
Yep.
That are in the charter. And I would imagine that all of my fellow colleagues there probably have a couple things that are glaring issues to them as well.
Yeah.
And I
no,
think that would save a lot of time if we could start addressing that first and then go back.
My concern with that process, Betty, is that we end up confusing ourselves with the work that we've already done. While where we're going in order right now, it's a structured process, whereas, you know, if you have a, you know, an interest item that's on the select board, for example, and then, you
Which
know,
I do.
Larry has an interest item on the moderator, and Len has an interest item on the DPW. If I structure an agenda around those three items and then say, all right, well, we're gonna go back to chapter 2 again, I think that creates chaos, and I'm certainly open to folks changing the process, but I think that the work we've been doing has been solid. I think we're doing things the right way, the way that we were appointed to do.
Well,
So what I'll say is, I don't wanna have more discussion about this in open session. If you have feelings about how these meetings have been run, please address them with me. Whether you think that they've been run properly, or if there's an alternative, I'm open to both forms of feedback. And I'd ask that you do that with me as soon as possible.
Well, it's nothing improper, Dave. I'm just trying to
No,
save time.
I'm not accusing you of criticizing me or my process. I'm simply saying, if folks want to change the way that we're doing them, please give me a call. I'm open to hearing it. Is there any other old business? Hearing and seeing none, and without objection, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Happy New Year.